We got stuck in repetitive cycles and dysfunctional patterns that kept us from moving forward.
And I really don't think we would have made it through that season where we were about to call it quits if we hadn't intentionally taken some of these steps.
Welcome to the Blended Family Coaching Show, where you'll discover how to move your step family from just surviving to truly thriving.
Grab your headphones and listen in as we share practical, real-life strategies for building healthy bonds,
Understanding the kids' perspective,
romance and partnership,
parenting with great teamwork.
and yes, even co-parenting with a difficult ex.
We're Mike and Kim Anderson, and we believe with the right tools, every step couple can overcome the common challenges of step family life.
Join us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations to discover how you can lead your family with confidence and create the future you really want.
Hi there. Thanks for joining us for this final episode of 2021.
Ooh.
I don't know about you, but to me, it seems like this year has just flown by. And now we're only days away from ringing in the new year.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. And if maybe you've hopped into the podcast sometime this year and you've been listening for a while and happened to catch our show on Apple Podcasts, would you consider leaving a rating or a review if you haven't already? Simply scroll down in your app to the ratings and reviews, tap the star rating that you believe best fits our show. And if you have a moment, we'd love to hear more detail from you as well. Just tap write a review at the bottom of that section. We'd really love to hear from you and appreciate your honest feedback.
Absolutely. And as we head into 2022, we thought it might be a great opportunity to share a few of the lessons that we've learned throughout our journey. And not just this past year, although we have learned a lot in 2021, but we want to reflect on some of the most impactful discoveries we made in our 20 years of marriage and blended family life.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of low lows over the years, and we've had some highs to celebrate as well.
For sure.
But what we'll be focusing on today are some of the most valuable lessons we've learned, those aha moments that kind of opened our eyes to new possibilities and changed the trajectory of our journey.
That's right. And these valuable lessons have helped us to keep moving forward through every low point and difficult challenge and kept us from getting stuck along the way. You know, I think if we had to wrap up how we feel about these lessons overall, the best word is probably grateful.
Absolutely.
You know, if you've been listening to the show for any length of time, you probably already know that we almost separated 10 years ago because we did feel stuck in many ways. And the lessons that we're going to talk about today are some key discoveries that helped us to stay together and make positive changes that saved our relationship and really our family.
Yeah. And, you know, regardless of the season that you're in right now, maybe things feel really rocky and hopeless, or maybe things have been going smoothly for your family. Wherever you might be, today's episode is for you.
For sure.
Because we know that everyday life in a blended family can change on a dime.
For sure.
It doesn't take much to rock the boat and for dynamics to shift. So even if it's been smooth sailing for a while for your family, you'll want to be prepared for that time when something suddenly shifts. Either with the kids and their developmental stages and attitudes, or maybe with a former spouse and all of those delicate dynamics, or even in your marital connection. It's most likely that you'll experience some bumps in the road ahead, and these things that we've learned through all the ups and downs of blending might just help you to navigate your family's not so smooth seasons when they come.
For sure, for sure. And, you know, we want you to benefit from our kind of hard knocks knowledge.
Right.
We've been to the school of hard knocks in so many ways over the years. And what's been most impactful for us are just a few mindset shifts. They might be simple, but simple isn't always easy. However, our hope is that you might be able to learn from some of our mistakes.
Yeah.
And that's going to build your wisdom and hopefully help you avoid some pitfalls. You know, I've heard it said that a fool keeps repeating their mistakes. A smart person learns from their mistakes, but a wise person learns from other people's mistakes.
Yeah.
Here's another quote about wisdom. A symptom of wisdom is curiosity. The evidence of wisdom is calmness and perseverance. The causes of wisdom are experimentation and understanding.
Oh, I love that. So hopefully you're feeling curious about what Mike and Kim have learned along the way. And if so, that's a great indication that you're ready to acquire some new insights and wisdom today.
Mm-hmm.
And if your goal for your blended family is to experience more calmness and to be able to persevere through the tough stuff, that will ultimately be evidence of the wisdom that you continue to gain along the way and the mindset shifts that you're able to make.
Yeah.
So we're ready to offer our unique understanding and possibly some new ways for you to experiment and approach blended family life. So let's dive in.
All right. Yeah, let's do that. The first big lesson that we want to share from our experience is this. When we turn small things into big things, everyone suffers.
Yep.
You know, when we first got married, it didn't take long before I started to notice how the reality of my experience didn't seem to match up with my original expectations of what I thought our family life was going to look like. And in my state of kind of disbelief, sometimes even anxiety, I kind of leaned into getting nitpicky. Yeah. Oh, I thought you were going to agree with that really quickly.
I was being kind, but yes, you did get nitpicky.
I did. And honestly, I got nitpicky around every little thing. You know, this was especially true around my view of how you were parenting Annika. And there were all kinds of small things that I tended to overreact to. And it just kind of turned a lot of molehills into mountains.
Yeah, they became major things.
Totally, yeah. When Annika would maybe have a fairly benign bad habit, or maybe she would roll her eyes at you.
So she was basically being a kid.
Yeah, she was kind of being a kid, but in my eyes, I felt like there was some disrespect mingled in there. You didn't necessarily see it the same way I did. And I took the little things and said, are you going to let her get away with that? We need to hold her accountable for that. We need to make sure that we're going to change this and that. Even in the small things, I didn't have a barometer to figure out what the degree was of, well, what are the things we really need to address and what are the things we don't need to address?
Where's the priority?
And it wasn't just in parenting either. You know, one thing that happened to come up for you and I is, you know what, Kim tends to be a really clean person, but she also likes to have a lot of stuff around. I'm probably not as clean as Kim, but I really don't like clutter.
Yeah, you're a minimalist.
Yeah, there's a difference between cleanliness and clutter, right? And we represent each of those sides of the coin. I can't stand clutter. And I would nitpick about this lane here or that lane there, and I would just get really frustrated. And then that would cause relational tension in between you and me. All of a sudden, this thing that got left in the counter is a marital argument. Right?
Yeah, or like coming to blows.
Yeah, absolutely. Or how about when your former spouse wanted to have some sort of small flexibility in the schedule with Annika, and it was something you felt you were willing to do, but I want to stick to the plan. I'm like, oh, he wants to pick her up an hour early. I want to pull the parenting plan out, and I'm going to check the time and all that. Like I tend to, that's just kind of my tendency.
Yeah. And you like a plan.
I do like a plan, but you know, an hour early is probably a really small thing in the grand scheme of things. And what's really interesting, you know, I'm just so good at this whole turning molehills into mountain things. It's a real talent, actually, I think. But I've actually even discovered it, even with our mutual kids recently, because I think sometimes what happens, I was talking about expectations earlier. It comes through not only in my expectations of what my experience is going to be, but in what I expect out of others sometimes too. You know, Phoebe, our middle daughter, our mutual daughter, has talked to me sometimes about how it's really hard to please me. She's vocalized, Dad, you have really high expectations. And, you know, Phoebe and I are close. We're connected.
Yeah, it's
We've
great
got a
she
great
was able to say
relationship.
that to you.
Yeah. But there's times where she feels like she's not good enough, or she feels like she's not getting it right.
She misses the mark.
Yeah. And the truth is sometimes that's because my expectations tend to be so high at times that the little things become the big things, and then everyone suffers.
Yeah, the little things kind of get blown out of proportion a bit sometimes.
Exactly. And it's just kind of where I lean. And I don't think I'm alone.
No.
I've heard that same response or story or frustration that come from other couples that we've gotten to serve along the way. And I know how challenging that can be.
Especially for people that are perfectionists.
Yeah. And I definitely am a recovering perfectionist. Yeah. You know, right now I get the benefit of hindsight. And I've left a little bit of collateral damage along the way, but I've really tried to work on healing that as I think about looking back on those little things that I turned into big things. And I just kind of have to go, man, look how irrational and unproductive my behavior was at little points along the way. But, you know, in the heat of the moment, it was just easy for me to try to fill my need to be right. And then my painful emotions would erupt and my priorities and my expectations got in the way. And then, you know, it was just almost impossible for me to respond in a reasonable and rational way. I would become overly critical. I'd get angry or grumpy and I'd go into fix-it mode. I'm really good at that too. Fix-it mode, perfectionism. I think they go hand in hand, you know. And the truth is, after a while, I came to discover that those reactions only made things worse. Our relationship suffered. Everyone in our home experienced higher levels of tension. And I was kind of banging my head up against the wall because there was just didn't seem to be an easy fix for a lot of the issues. And honestly, I didn't have all the right answers, even though for a long time I really thought I did.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So I guess the question is, what do we do about it, right? Because I like I said, I don't think I'm the only one who tends to turn molehills into mountains. And so maybe we could talk about a strategy that we've put into play throughout our journey that's helped us to avoid turning these small things into big things. Because the truth is, you have done this too. You just do it in a little bit of a different way, right? You know, for me, when it came to coping with this overreaction that I have in those moments when, you know, anxiousness hits or my frustration is taking over, it was helpful for me to learn ways to kind of, I'll say, expand my thought process. And I discovered that what often drives my anxiousness are the stories that I can create in my head. And as it turns out, I think we all actually do this, right? If you've ever just tried to change a negative belief or a thought that you have about someone in the moment when you're feeling hurt or offended or angry or anxious, you know it's probably not that easily done, right? Especially without first understanding where those thoughts and those emotions are coming from. When we're feeling hurt or frustrated or unheard by someone we love, it's usually because we've got a negative story about their motives or their intentions toward us.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you left that thing on the counter because you just don't like me anymore. You don't respect me. I can't believe you left the spoon laying on the counter when you know I don't like clutter, right? When for you, it's like, I forgot to pick the spoon up off the counter. Big deal, right? And so we've got to challenge ourselves to ask if that story is really the truth about who that person is and what's really going on underneath the surface of this whole situation. So we need to ask how we can either correct or confirm our story so that we can move beyond those overwhelming emotions to communicate in a way that leads to deeper understanding and more positive outcomes in the end.
Yeah.
When I was able to learn ways to honestly communicate and admit that I had some stories in my head about you, honey, then I was able to calmly and respectfully start to put my story out there for you to either confirm it or correct it. And things really changed for us after that.
That was
in
huge.
fact, I remember there was a leadership conference we were at where we heard this whole idea of using the language, the story in my head, and we actually started putting it into place just in our marriage.
Yeah.
And it started really changing things. You know, as an example, I was just kind of joking about the spoon on the counter, but you know, that's actually not that far off for me.
You can get really hung up on things.
I can, but rather than getting upset, well, why'd you leave the spoon on the counter? I can't believe you did that to me. You just don't respect me enough to pick the spoon up off the counter. It might sound something more like, hey, honey, I noticed that the spoon was on the counter and sometimes the story in my head about that is that you just don't have enough respect for me to pick things up. And I'm wondering what you can tell me about that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm still talking about it.
Right.
I'm still expressing what's going on underneath, but it's such a more respectful and connecting type of interaction.
Mm-hmm.
Now we can actually talk about it, and you can say, no, honey, I love you. I just forgot to pick the spoon up off the counter.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
You're
exactly.
correcting my story. And what I've learned over the past 20 years is that a lot of times my stories just were simply untrue, or at least they weren't completely true.
Mm-hmm.
And my overreaction tended to be a result of just some negative triggers that really had nothing to do with you, honey. They were rooted in my past experience and my wounds that I brought into this marriage.
Right. And, there were also times when your story was right on.
Yeah,
and we
that's
did
true.
have an issue
Yeah.
that we needed to work through.
Yeah, I'll show him. I'll leave the spoon on the counter.
No.
I'm just kidding. That never actually happened.
But the truth is, when you were able to openly share your story, and when you admitted it was a story, not
Yeah.
necessarily the truth, and you didn't try to fix it or fix me, you didn't get critical and angry.
Yeah.
At that point, I was able to stay calm as well and really hear your story without taking it too personally or getting offended or upset or hurt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Big difference.
It made a huge difference
Yeah.
because you could hear my story, that I was even challenging my own story, and I wasn't just accepting it as truth.
Right.
And I really wanted to know what was going on for you.
You were trying to get things straight,
Absolutely.
even in your confusion.
Right. Yeah, for sure. So the little nugget of wisdom around overreaction is to become your own story detective, right? You're kind of maintaining a curiosity mindset and moving away from snap judgments. And again, this isn't an easy fix thing. This isn't something that is just going to come naturally. It is a fairly simple concept, but it's going to take some intentional practice, and that takes energy and that takes effort. But everyone can learn to do this.
Absolutely.
And we know how beneficial this can be for couples. We've really lived it.
Yeah. In fact, we found this to be so beneficial in our marriage that we actually did a deep dive back in
That's
episode
right.
36 on this topic with our friend Mark Warren, who's an expert on how to change your stories and grow more connection in all your relationships, not just in your marriage.
Yeah.
So if you'd like to learn how to effectively move away from overreacting and blowing up the small stuff, we encourage you to check out that episode, and we'll put a link in the show notes for you to make it easy.
Right.
So we've learned how easy it is for little things to quickly turn into big things for blended families.
Right.
And sometimes it's not because of an overreaction like you just talked about, honey, but it can happen when we're overly sensitive and take things too personally.
Okay. So not an overreaction about these little nitpicky things that are happening, but an oversensitivity of what's going on inside.
Right. And this has been a struggle for me over the years. I was pretty sensitive when you tried to talk to me about your perspectives and you tried to share your disappointments with me. I would make some quick assumptions myself and jump to unfair conclusions about your motives and your beliefs about me. The truth is, I got my feelings hurt a lot by little things. And then they'd get magnified and suddenly morph into big things that would just set me off and keep me from understanding the situation from a more realistic vantage point. And it would take a long time for me to recover emotionally.
Sure.
So the lesson here is a thick skin and an open heart builds connection.
Yeah, what an interesting combination, a thick skin and an open heart. You know, back in episode 105, we talked about the powerful traits every couple needs to successfully blend and stay united. Those were empathy, humility, courage, curiosity, flexibility, and patience. But I think we might need to add another one to that list, and that's this whole idea of developing a thick skin.
Yeah.
And that comes in handy within blended family dynamics, right?
Yeah.
We need to have the ability to let things kind of slide off our back at times. And I think we also need to add some forgiveness in there because that's
Right.
one of those powerful
That's
traits
a piece
as
of
well.
it.
But the reality is we are going to get our feelings hurt on occasion. When a stepchild ignores your efforts to connect with them, when your spouse doesn't agree with a parenting decision you made, when you realize that someone in your family, maybe one of your biological kids, is disappointed or even angry with you for whatever reason, the list can go on and on and on. Oh, yeah, and on.
Feelings hurt.
Absolutely. And of course, this also includes our co-parenting relationships, right? We get undermined or kind of thrown under the bus sometimes by that former spouse, and that's hurtful. And if we choose to let ourselves be crushed under the weight of that hurt feeling, we might end up being crushed a lot of the time. And when we're feeling crushed, that tends to close off our heart to understanding what others are experiencing or what they're trying to communicate. That whole empathy thing that we talked about last week just kind of disappears.
Yeah. And if we stay stuck there and we don't recover from this emotional crushing, we can become discouraged or depressed. We might simply check out and just become unavailable to our family.
Yeah.
Or we might play the martyr and take on that poor me mentality. And I know this one all too well because I wasted a lot of precious time and energy and connection with my family when I allowed this to be my reality in our early years of blending. There's some regret around that. So when we're struggling under the weight of hurt feelings and painful emotions, it's not just us who suffers. Everyone does.
For sure.
But this is a tricky thing to navigate because our feelings are very real, and we don't want to discount our emotions or shut down what's going on inside, even if it's something small that we're reacting to. So we need to find a way to manage our feelings without allowing them to take us over and take us out. And the goal here is to acknowledge our pain, work through the emotions as well as the issue, whatever it might be, then choose to forgive the offense and make a timely recovery by letting it go and moving on.
Yeah, that's good.
And do all of this without holding on to resentments, carrying a grudge, or disconnecting.
So without allowing your heart to get closed.
Right.
Yeah.
And this is a huge goal.
Yeah.
It's not easy. And this is something we get to help blended couples with all the time through one of our specific coaching programs. The truth is feelings get hurt all the time in blended families, and we need some practical tools to learn how to deal with that.
That's true. And, if you want to learn more, then use the link in the show notes to schedule a free coaching call with us. We'd be happy to identify if that's the right next step for you.
But let's talk a bit about a practical strategy to help you develop a thicker skin that will help you to keep a more open heart posture and move away from oversensitivity if that's something that you struggle with like I have for years. And this tip, it sounds so simple, but learning how to do consistent self-care is something that's really helped me to grow in this challenging area of being a little overly sensitive when things come up and I get hurt. And this is because when I'm taking good care of myself and practicing self-care, physically, mentally, emotionally, socially, and spiritually, and when I'm maintaining a healthy rhythm around my schedule, and I'm practicing self-compassion and carving out time for things that feed my soul and really increase my sense of mastery and competence and security and well-being, in essence, when my self-care tank is filled to the top, then I'm much less likely to become overly sensitive or get crushed under the weight of hurt feelings.
So a little bit of good self-care actually keeps all of those buckets full.
Yeah, consistent self-care. And then I'm actually equipped to meet that big goal that I just talked about a minute ago and to work through it, to let things go and move on. I've discovered that I can make a timely recovery from hurt feelings when I'm consistently practicing good self-care. And as an added bonus, I show up better for everyone when my tank is full and my heart is open.
Yeah, for sure.
Because the truth is you can't give what you don't have. So if you're feeling depleted in this area of self-care, it's probably going to be very difficult for you to manage painful emotions and effectively lead your family through the tough realities that you might be experiencing, like hurt feelings and disappointments.
Yeah. And, this intentional practice of self-care isn't just, a woman thing. A lot of times we hear self-care and guys are like, yeah, bubble baths and,
spa
whatever.
day.
Yeah, right. The truth is, this is something that us guys need to pay attention to.
Mm-hmm.
And, a lot of us are prone to burnout.
Mm-hmm.
I know I am. So if this is something that you want to improve in your life and keep your tank filled to the top, we've got a great resource from psychologist Nick Wignall. We've talked about Nick on the show many times. It's a practical guide called Self-Care, what it really is and how to do it well. Pretty simple title.
It's really good.
Yeah, we encourage you to read that insightful article because this is an area where we've had quite a few mindset shifts in our crazy, busy family dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there are some mindset shifts or some new healthy habits that'll really benefit you. Ultimately, that'll benefit your family as well.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to the third lesson that we've learned.
Right. The third lesson is we cannot move forward without taking steps of growth.
Ah, okay.
And this lesson is twofold for us, and we find it's twofold for most couples.
Mm-hmm.
We had to be willing to invest in our growth as a couple and our individual personal growth as well.
Yeah, and this looks different for everyone. But for us, growth as a couple meant engaging in blended family learning.
Mm-hmm.
We did workshops and podcasts and books and specific curriculums that focused on our unique blended family dynamics. It also meant learning how to make our marriage strong and vibrant, investing in our romantic relationship by having regular date nights and attending marriage retreats, as well as doing the hard relationship work like counseling and some of the seminars we've been to, and even a marriage intensive. We've also developed relationships with mentor couples and gained a lot of wisdom from them over the years. So what's the point? Mm-hmm. Well, we intentionally focused on how to grow the health of our marriage.
And we focused on blended family dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as individuals, we had a lot of growth that needed to take place as well.
For sure.
We each came into our marriage with hurts and hang-ups from our pasts.
Mm-hmm.
There was unresolved baggage and old wounds that still needed healing. And, I think sometimes people have this belief that marriage should just kind of erase all of that pain from the past and fix everything for us.
Right.
And sometimes we rely on our spouse to heal those old wounds and to make us feel whole.
Yeah, I think we both had that mindset when we got together.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is, it's not our spouse's responsibility to unpack and resolve the baggage that we've dragged into this relationship.
Right.
They can certainly be empathetic to our pain, but it's up to us to take our own steps, or even leaps sometimes, of personal growth if we want to be whole and move forward through all the ups and downs of blended family life and a step-family marriage.
Right.
You cannot rely on your spouse to fill all the gaps for you. They can't possibly provide that, and you'll always end up in disappointment if that's what you're expecting. Unfortunately, blended couples tend to have a lot of relational baggage from their past. There's lingering hurt and loss, maybe bitterness that inadvertently leaks out into the current relationship, and it can create a lot of pain. We've been there on way more than one occasion, yeah.
Yeah. I was somewhat naive and unprepared entering into blended family life.
Yeah.
I knew things were going to be different than in first family life, but I didn't want to think about what that actually meant.
Right.
And when the challenges hit, I was reluctant to deal with it, right? I didn't really have a growth mindset back then. I often chose to just ignore or avoid all these relational issues and all the tension that seemed to keep coming up over and over again for us. And, I felt pretty overwhelmed as these conflicting emotions really clouded and distorted my thoughts. I was confused. And instead of taking steps towards understanding and growth, I dug my heels in.
You can be a little stubborn sometimes.
Yeah. And as a result, we got stuck. We got stuck in repetitive cycles and dysfunctional patterns that kept us from moving forward.
Yeah.
And we were mostly miserable back then.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting how when one of us gets stuck, we all get stuck?
Yeah.
So much of our growth as a family and as a couple is dependent on our growth as individuals.
That's so true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when we coach couples around the difficult realities that every blended family faces, we usually see one of two reactions. The first one can be an aha response. If clarity and openness is all of a sudden hits them and they want to learn more.
Right. They're excited.
That's the person who's kind of taking off the blinders. They're ready to deal with reality. And maybe as you're listening in on this conversation, I actually hope that's you.
It probably is if you're listening.
That's true. That's right.
Good for you.
We also see another reaction that's very different, and we see it happen all the time. The person who visibly changes when they hear something that defies their ideas about how things should be.
Right.
You know, their body language swiftly closes off. Their facial expressions become more harsh. You just see the walls go up. They've shut down. They're unwilling to take that next step of growth. They may not want to hear tough truths, or they simply aren't willing to deal with that reality. Maybe they're stuck, and when that individual gets stuck, they create a stuckness for their marriage and for their family.
Everyone gets stuck.
Yeah.
And that second reaction that you just described, honey, that was me throughout many different seasons of our journey. Would you agree?
There were times, yes.
Yeah. So until I learned about what psychologists refer to as cognitive distortions or patterns of thinking that aren't reality-based, I really stayed stuck.
Yeah.
So let's talk about this a little bit. These patterns can hinder your ability to accept information or internalize something new. They can hijack healthy growth and keep you stuck behind a self-imposed wall of resistance and isolation. So let's talk about what this looks like. We want to briefly explore 5 examples of distorted thought patterns that psychologist John Townsend describes in his book, Leading from Your Gut: How You Can Succeed by Harnessing the Power of Your Values, Feelings, and Intuition. So as you listen to us describe these 5 examples, see if you recognize any of these patterns in your own thinking, especially when things get rocky in your home.
Okay.
So the first one is helplessness. That's when we've got this sense of, well, I've tried everything and nothing helps, as if there are no choices available to you. This might leave you feeling paralyzed or overwhelmed, unable to consider something new because you've kind of lost hope. You're hopeless and helpless.
Sure. Or the next one is passivity. And that's that pattern in which you're afraid or you're hesitant to take some initiative. So you wait for someone or some circumstance to provide the solution. This is kind of like a default mode or abdicating or avoiding. We're just passive. Oh, whatever happens, happens.
Right.
Yeah.
The next one is negativity. And this is a well-known pattern in which there's an imbalance of negative over positive. It is often justified as being realistic.
Yeah. I'm just being real.
Yeah. But it's generally built on fear of failure, not necessarily reality.
Yeah. So we've got helpless, passivity, negativity. And then 4th is self-protective rationalizing. Ooh, that sounds really intense.
It does.
So this is a scenario in which you're unable to own your own contribution to a problem, or you're unable to accept another person's feedback. So you rationalize your position to the point of uselessness. Boy, I think we all struggle with this one at times because it's so easy for me to say, hey, this is all your fault. And if you would just change, then everything would be fine.
Yeah.
And we don't take ownership of the part of the problem that we're creating.
And we rationalize our behavior even when all the evidence shows otherwise.
Yes.
All right. And the 5th one is one solution thinking. The idea that there's only one answer to a situation. This kind of thinking is very limited and is usually produced by anxiety or a perfectionistic streak. So it has to be our way.
Yeah.
Sometimes there is only one answer, but most of the time there are several options that we can consider.
Yeah. Being Mr. Fix-It, I love to jump into fix-it mode. That one I can really struggle with sometimes. Oh, just do this and everything will be fine, right? One of the things that I've been sharing with people recently that I think is becoming even more of a reality for me is rarely in this whole blended family journey is there a single simple answer for anything.
So true.
And when we get this one solution thinking going, boy, we're setting ourselves up for a trap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, maybe you were able to relate to one or more of these distorted mindsets.
All 5, maybe.
I have to admit that when I'm facing some difficult issues and a lot of hard emotions, my go-tos are passivity and negativity.
Mm-hmm.
And in step family life, we've seen that distorted thinking can easily lead couples to repeat the same patterns of behavior over and over, and yet they expect different results.
Yeah.
That happens to be the definition of insanity. And we've been there.
For sure.
Right? We claim that we want our family to be healthy and for things to get better, but we aren't willing or able to put forth the effort to get there because distorted thought patterns have taken over. I remember hoping that everything would somehow magically improve in our family. But in reality, everything got worse because I chose to avoid the issues and stay stuck in these cognitive distortions. And maybe you've experienced thoughts like these that tend to keep people stuck. Listen to these. I just don't have the time or energy to focus on healing, and I'd rather just leave my past in the past. It's too much to deal with.
Or how about, we don't really need to read another book or reach out to anyone for help. We can figure this out on our own. Eventually, it'll just work out.
Yeah. Or how about this one? Trying something new isn't going to work anyway. Everything's fine. We just need to suck it up and get used to the way things are.
Yeah. We've already tried everything anyway.
Oh, yeah. Everything.
Yeah.
And, I've thought all of those things and many more destructive, distorted thoughts that really stifled my ability to grow in every area, both personally and for our marriage and our family.
Yeah.
And like I said, I was really stuck.
And, according to Dr. Townsend, to some extent, we all have some of these cognitive distortion patterns. I mean, they're kind of underlying, they're part of our operating system. But he also offers some healthy tips to move beyond the distorted thoughts, which can give us a healthier mindset and the ability to engage in the process of growth as we move forward. And remember, that's our lesson learned here, is that we cannot move forward without taking steps of growth.
Absolutely. Right? So let's look at these. The first one is to identify the patterns that you might be challenged by. So just take some time to be mindful and honestly observe your thoughts, especially when you're faced with a stressful situation or a decision. This might include examining the stories in your head too, right?
Absolutely. Then you can do a reality check with trusted people who know you well and those who aren't afraid to tell you the truth. Ask them to assess your openness to growth. Ask for their honest opinion of how well you cope with reality. Then, here's the trick. Listen to their feedback without getting defensive. Take it to heart and learn from their perspective.
Now, if you discover that patterns of distorted thinking exist, commit to a 30-day practice of reviewing your thoughts each day and look for any evidence of the cognitive distortion patterns that you've identified.
Sure.
Simply being aware of your patterns will go a long way in helping you to move beyond distorted thoughts, and then you won't get stuck.
So I got to trade in my gratitude journal for a cognitive distortion journal.
You could do both. Yeah.
That's right. That's probably a better option, actually. Yeah. Now, once you become aware, ask some well-grounded people like a counselor, a coach, or some sort of an expert. Just ask them this question. Hey, how would you have thought about this specific issue? The best thinking occurs when you look at various scenarios and play them out, either in your mind or with other people. So having others model healthy ways of thinking are going to help you to continue moving yourself in that direction.
Absolutely. And again, this isn't easy. There are no easy fixes.
Right.
But emotionally charged issues and challenges don't have to lead to distorted thinking. You can choose to change those patterns and take healthy steps forward toward new growth and a healthier mindset.
Yeah.
When I started to correct my distorted thoughts and I stopped being negative and passive, our family experienced so many great changes.
Yeah, I agree
it
with
really
that.
was a game changer.
Yeah. Now, as we've each made some changes individually and as a couple, we certainly weren't perfect every time we faced a challenge,
No.
but we did make a lot of imperfect progress and we were able to keep moving forward together. And I really don't think we would have made it through that season where we were about to call it quits if we hadn't intentionally taken some of these steps of growth.
I agree.
Yeah. So those are the big 3 lessons that we've learned over the years.
Yeah.
1, when we turn small things into big things, everyone suffers.
2, a thick skin and an open heart builds connection.
That's right. And 3rd, we cannot move forward without taking steps of growth. Now, these might seem a little conceptual to you, and in some ways they really are. But that's usually true about lessons that require a mindset shift. It's all about your focus, but it doesn't really end there. One of the big reasons that these lessons have been really impactful for our journey is because of these 3 mindsets actually apply to every aspect of blended family life. When we struggled with misguided mindsets and got stuck in unhealthy patterns, every area of our life together was negatively impacted, and often relational tension and disconnection was the result.
And we all want our relationships to be close and bonded in our blended family. But when it comes to creating healthy bonds and merging your 2 families, how do you choose to handle all the little relational bumps and bruises? And what's the degree of growth that you're investing into your family's future? This will greatly influence the outcome of your blended process and the bonds that you're able to build.
That's true. And we all know how imperative it is to be able to put ourselves into our kids' shoes and really understand their perspective and be able to support them through their tough emotions and transitions as we blend as well. But if every little thing gets turned into something big, or we overreact when our kids share something that's really difficult, we might actually fail to provide that safe space for them. And then they might end up shutting down on us emotionally.
Yeah, they need a place to process.
For sure.
And of course, like we've already talked about quite a bit today, these 3 mindsets can impact the health of your marriage and your connection. And they can impact us in some negative ways if we're stuck in unhealthy patterns. But if you're able to make a shift in how you think about each other, and if you're willing to learn and grow, your relationship will be strengthened.
Yeah. And what about parenting, which is probably the most challenging area most blended couples have to navigate? In fact, it's one of the primary reasons people reach out to us for help. If you're overreacting, or you're overly sensitive, you don't have a thick skin, or maybe you're stuck in one of those distorted thought patterns, I'd say it's almost impossible to rationally discuss the many things that need to be discussed when it comes to parenting kids and stepkids. And honey, when you and I finally discovered these 3 lessons, that's when we really started to make some progress as parenting partners and work together. Would you say that's true?
Absolutely true, yeah. And the final area of blended family life that will be impacted is how we approach our co-parenting relationships, which directly impacts the well-being of our children. And we've been through some very rocky seasons with my former spouse, which created a lot of stress in our home and between us.
Right.
And we had to learn to let the minor offenses go because when I held on to them and when I was crushed under the weight of my ex's opinions and his attacks, I learned that he actually had a lot of power over me, which negatively impacted our home.
Yeah, your skin was too thin.
It was. And I struggled with distorted thoughts around my former spouse as well, which kept me stuck in a place of passivity, indecision, and fear, which ended up backfiring, causing me even more pain and hurting my daughter as well.
I really struggled in that area, just not nitpicking the little things and trying to learn to be more flexible. And,
right.
Yeah. So, these lessons have been invaluable for us in the 5 most essential areas of blending a family. That's bonding, understanding kids' perspective, our marriage, parenting, and co-parenting.
Right.
And we're confident that if you take these 3 things seriously, they can make a big difference for you as well. And next week, as we enter into 2022, it's coming quick. It's right around the corner. Instead of making a New Year's resolution, which a lot of us abandon before January's over, right? We're going to challenge and encourage you to pick just one of these 5 areas of blended family life so that you can embark on a new season of learning and growth.
Next week, we're going to get really practical. So we're going from conceptual this week to concrete next week.
That was good alliteration. I like that.
We'll be walking you through a process that's action-oriented, and we're supplying all the resources you need to step into the new year with new resolve to create something new in your blended family.
Nice. Now, if you've gained some understanding and wisdom around what we've learned through these 20 years of blending, hopefully you're ready to take action and really make a difference for your family in 2022. You really don't want to miss next week.
That's right.
But that is all going to make this episode a wrap.
Until next time.